and welcome to Marketing to Complex Industries, presented by Godfrey, a B2B marketing agency for industries like yours. On each episode, we feature conversations about the latest challenges, strategies, and technologies for B2B marketers. I'm your host, Scott Trobaugh. As VP of Creative at Godfrey, I help our team unlock the amazing potential of the brands we serve. On this episode, I'm pleased to welcome Matt Snodgrass from MarketingProfs. Matt was their Director of Marketing up until about a year ago when he became their first ever Director of Community. Now, Matt sat down with me and Godfrey's Executive Creative Director, Cliff Lewis, to talk about what that shift means for MarketingProfs, how they've changed their format for this year's B2B Forum, at which Cliff and I are speaking, and a host of other interesting topics. It was a fun hour I think you'll enjoy. So without further ado, here's our conversation with Matt. Hi, Matt. It's good to have you on the podcast today.
Hey, Scott. Thanks for having me here.
And Cliff's joining us, as he does on occasion. How you doing, Cliff?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day. It's a beautiful day. It's good to not be in February anymore. I just like knowing it's not necessarily a non-winter month, but it's not purely a winter month, which is that alone, just seeing that on the calendar makes me feel a little better.
It's true. For those listening, we're recording this on the 1st of March, and the sky is actually blue where we are. Which
I just like hearing you say that.
Yeah. 1st of March, and I always thought as a kid, why isn't that just springtime? March 1st, boom, spring, done. But instead, it's like 3 more weeks before it's officially spring. But,
I'm wearing shorts right now.
Yeah, I am too.
Well, geez, we still have snow on the ground. Are we in the same state?
We still have snow on the ground too. It's rapidly melting now. As I look out the window, I can't see it from this angle. So does it exist? I don't know.
My son and I built an igloo over the last couple of weeks when it was really cold and we had a lot of snow. And then it went from 20 degrees to 50s in just a span of a few days. So he asked me last night if I'd go out and put a tarp on it to keep the rain on so we can keep it alive for as long as we can. So currently I have a half melted tarped igloo in my yard.
Life support.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So Matt, I will say the last 2 times that Cliff and I have worked directly with you, you've always had a hat on.
This is true. Usually when we work together, I'm costumed up in some sort of attire. I am not today. Luckily, I'm at home. But yeah, the last couple of times we've worked together have been at the MarketingProfs B2B Forum, and you guys have asked if I would dress up and act in one of your skits. So I love doing that. I love getting up on stage with you guys and being able to help out. So yeah, it's been fun. I don't have my speedy delivery hat on today. I should have got it. It would have been a great prop for this podcast. I didn't even think about it until just now.
It would have been good. I saw a picture of that again recently, and I just, even in a still photo, you just inhabited that role. So
well, I like to really get into character for both the lines I usually have in these things.
The characterization was excellent, and just for context for our listeners, I think Scott and I have done this talk a few times where we present on why Fred Rogers is the patron saint of B2B, and we were delivering a version of that talk at the 2018 B2B Forum, and we have a segment where basically a stand-in for Mr. McFeely's speedy delivery arrives at the door and delivers a letter that we later read. And we needed somebody to do it. And I mean, I'd like to know like how that conversation went, Matt, when somebody approached you about this and said, like, we'd like you to be the sacrificial lamb and dress up like a mailman.
I think it was Julie or Ann or someone came to me and said, "Hey, Godfrey needs help with one of their skits. Can you help?" And I say, "Sure," because every time something needs to be done that's just out there or random at B2B, I seem to be the one who did it. Side note, Ann wanted me to wear a unicorn costume one year, and I drew the line there because I was not wearing a skin tight unicorn costume up on stage in front of hundreds of you guys. So I do have my boundaries, but she said, "Hey, they need you to dress up and be a mailman or UPS or something." And I said, sure, that's fine. And I think if memory serves, didn't I have a UPS shirt on one year?
You did.
We do actual UPS?
Yeah. Well, I was like, I needed to get a mailman costume for this. And I thought, well, we're going to San Francisco in a town that size with that kind of just like colorful personality. There's no way in the world that I'm not going to be able to find a good costume shop. And I called around to like 6 different places and nobody had a mailman costume. They just, for some reason, it's this thing that I guess nobody ever needs or wants to do. But I finally found one down in the Haight-Ashbury district that was a UPS costume. And I was like, that'll do. That'll be perfect. And you absolutely brought a kinetic energy to that of somebody who is on a very serious schedule. Somebody who's GPS tracked and evaluated based on his speed and efficiency.
All of our conversations to you prior to the moment that you actually burst into the convention hall were very, very staid and professional. And I couldn't have expected how much you would have you just jumped into character at that moment. And I just remember being delighted.
Well, that's what we try to do. Like I said, I worked for literal minutes on both my lines, so I'm glad I could deliver for you guys. But it was fun. I miss being in person. I miss seeing you guys. I miss being able to hang out annually like we do.
Yeah,
so I hope soon enough we'll be back to some version of normal.
We got this in lieu of that, I suppose.
Yeah,
we do. Yeah, and the one coming up, we've got MarketingProfs coming up in April. Tell me a little bit about how things have changed from your perspective between the fall of 2019, when everything was quote unquote normal, and now, because you've done a number of events and they've all been virtual since then, correct?
We have, and I mean, virtual events are not necessarily new to us. We've been doing webinars and weekly seminars and our Take 10 tutorials and things like that for years, for a decade and a half. So we know how to do virtual events. We've never done anything at this scale. So in 2020, in the springtime, when we first started talking about the idea that we might not be able to get together in the fall like we normally do. And as you mentioned, the last time, or a couple of years ago, it was in San Francisco, and we've done Boston, and we did Washington, D.C. So we just started in March and April of last year talking about, well, maybe things won't be back to normal, and what do we do as a contingency plan? And then as we got into the summer, we realized, that dog don't hunt. We're not going to be able to make this work. So what can we do? And it was moving to a virtual format, which again is something we're familiar with, but never on this scale, never a multi-day event. And the hardest thing for us was, how do you replicate the fun and the energy and the camaraderie, the things that we just talked about? How do you emulate that when you've got hundreds and hundreds of people or thousands of people all sitting at their desks? It's absolutely a challenge, and it's a great challenge, but it certainly is one that we have been struggling with for years, because we come out of B2B every year and we think, oh, that was fantastic, and the feedback we got was great, and oh, this was so good, and we're going to do this differently next time, but this really worked. How can we prolong that magic? And Alan Weiss, our CEO, every year he comes out of B2B and says, okay, we need to bottle this. We need to catch this lightning in a bottle, and we need to make people feel this way day in, day out for the entire year. And we're like, oh, how do you take the magic of a 2 or 3 day event and make people feel that every single day? So we haven't cracked that code yet, but that was our big challenge, was how do we make this a fun and engaging and memorable event when people are literally, as we are now, just kind of bolted to our office chairs? And how do we make people want to stay in those seats for that time? Because it's a long day sitting there for 4 or 6 or 8 hours and watching session after session after session.
Well, and that feeds into your new role, if I'm not mistaken, because when we first started interacting with you, we were talking to the director of marketing for MarketingProfs, which, no pressure there. But now, tell me a little bit about your new title and role and what that entails.
Yeah, so just over a year ago, I moved into a new position at MarketingProfs as the director of community, sort of not because of this, but around the same time that this happened. And it turned out to be fortuitous, because we talked about this pre-show off the air, but we're seeing a lot more of these roles coming up, of a vice president of community, director of community, folks who are actively working to engage the community, build the community, because it has become, it's always been important, but it's become so much more important over the last 12 or 13 months, having a community you can fall back on, having a brand that is part of that community. So again, it was fortuitous that I sort of moved into this role, not because of the pandemic, but right as things were starting to happen. So I'm responsible for getting people engaged, for talking to people, building up our community, listening, getting people in the doors and talking to them and figuring out what it is that people want, what they're interested in, what they want more of, what can we do better. So it's all about the idea of giving back and being part of something bigger than just selling a product or providing a service or having a newsletter people sign up to. And that's, I think, what a lot of organizations have realized in the last year is we have a product, but the product is not the end all be all. We have a brand, but the brand is not the end all be all. All those things come together and they form this community. And so you've got a lot more organizations who are actively working at building up a community. I mean, they may have lots of customers or, thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of newsletter subscribers, but taking those people and putting them into an actual place where they are all, feeling accepted and feeling the same things and want to be together is very different. So that's one of the things that we're working on. And I was lucky in this role in that I walked into a position where we had a very good community already. It wasn't cohesive around any one thing per se. So there's not one gathering place. We don't have a Discord channel that everybody goes to or a Facebook group, but we have a number of these things. And it's all about kind of reaching people where they want to be reached. Some people would never join a Discord or a Slack group. Some people think Facebook is a devil and I don't want anything to do with your dirty Facebook group. Some people will never get on Twitter because it's a cesspool. So it's all about trying to reach folks where they are and where they want to talk.
See, I'd always heard Twitter referred to as a dumpster fire, but then 2020 got to be the dumpster fire. And so is Twitter the cesspool now? Is that...
Yeah, I guess it all depends. I mean, I am not terribly active on Twitter. In fact, I was just scrolling through the other day and realized why did I follow these people? And how old was I when I followed? When did this happen? Because I don't want this in my feed. This is not what I'm interested in anymore. And so it's an interesting sort of evolution from a personal standpoint to realize this is what I'm interested in now. And I could care less about these things that I obviously subscribed to at some point in my life, but I'm not interested in anymore. So
yeah,
it's...
I'm sorry.
It's really about obviously, like any social media, curating what it is you want out of it.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's the important thing because so often when I've gotten on recently, there's just so much, so many people. The trolls, really tend to come out and that sort of thing. And we do have power to curate that experience. I mean, I know people who are very, very careful about not crafting an echo chamber and that sort of thing, which I think is important. But the idea that you have some personal responsibility about that, you have some personal opportunity to craft your experience, I think is very important.
I think so too. And when you think about it from a brand standpoint, I talked to a fair number of folks who sort of have an old school mentality of, well, this is my company and this is my product. And if you don't like it, that's fine. I understand that my product is not for you. But you shouldn't pick and choose my company because of a social campaign I'm running or because of something that we believe in as an organization or something we support, a social cause. You should interact with us because you like and need our service, you like and need our product. And I think that's, fundamentally, I think that's a little bit of an archaic way of thinking. Because what we've seen over the last several years and really ramped up in the last year or two is that customers flock to organizations that they feel have sort of the same alignment as they do, whether it's social causes or campaigns or giving back or doing good or whatever it is. They want to work with companies that they feel have their same interests in mind. So it's not enough to just have the, if you build it, they will come mentality anymore. People are really looking for organizations that feel the same way and believe in the same things they do. So as a brand and as an individual, that's an important thing to realize. And I have probably been a little bit slower on the uptake given, I'm an older generation. I'm in my mid 40s. So I haven't been raised on social media and it's not ingrained in me per se. And so I've probably been a little slower on the uptake, but I see the value there and I'm actively trying to make these changes. And, we're working on this at MarketingProfs all the time, is trying to figure out, what is it that we do and what's our reason for being? Simon Sinek gives a great TED talk on why. And we always talk about the why, right? I mean, it's fantastic. And it's such a great exercise that every organization really should try to go through and figure out what your why is.
I've talked to a number of college students who are getting into marketing or they're getting into design. And every time I talk about Simon and I draw those circles and talk about it where so many companies do it from the outside in, and he talks about doing it from that core, from the inside out, to where the outside of it can almost be any product or service.
Yes.
As long as you're really consistent. And it always, you just see the light bulbs turn on, and I'm like, I got to you before you got out of college. Right?
Yeah.
That's really, really satisfying. Yeah.
I wish I had someone, when I went through my MBA program for marketing, I wish I had someone who talked that way. I wish that information was there, but nobody was at the time. And it was all, here's the 4 Ps and you got to learn your financial basics and things like that. But there was no push on the emotion and the feeling of things. And, I can't think that this was just a new invention that happened when Simon Sinek gave his talk, right? There have been people who have been keyed into this forever, but it just hasn't made its way into sort of the mainstream curriculum. So I wish desperately that's something I had known 20 years ago.
It's a deceptively simple message, to the point that it's almost like going to some Zen master, right? Where it just seems so simple and so clear, but you've got to push through a lot of nonsense to get there, I think.
And as you said, it makes total sense. Like when you said you saw that light bulb go out, and the first time, we discussed this internally, there was not go out, go on. And when we first discussed this internally, to the folks who hadn't heard it, we saw the same thing. Like, yes, this makes sense. It's just, it does take a lot of work to get through it and to figure out what that is. But when you get there, it really is, it resonates. So that's what we've been working on a lot for the past year.
That's really good. And I think that, one of the things that I like from engaging with your brand, and it's something that we try to do with Godfrey as well, is to be, completely authentic when we are operating with people, and to really lean into the joy and the excitement that we have in helping to make the world a better place, through marketing. Because so often we get we get this idea that marketing, we can be very cynical about it. And I'm guilty of having done that as well, because so many people have done it poorly for so long, and they've done it a bit greedily. But to actually market in a way that's authentic, and you're actually trying to make the world a better place, it does, I think, create that community. It creates that sense of belonging and synergy. Oh, that's a terrible word to use. But you know what I mean?
Oh, we're playing buzzword bingo right now. I'm marking off synergy.
Simpatico. There. Better?
Perfect.
I like it.
Yeah, it's go ahead, Cliff.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, that whole idea of finding your why, and you mentioned that you've been looking more closely at that than ever before over the last year. What do you feel like you've discovered? Like, what do you feel like you've learned that you hadn't quite considered before over the course of the last very tumultuous year? It now being March, we can pretty much say the last year.
Yep. I definitely think that we have found that it's okay to say no. And in our marketing team, we've been saying that for years, kind of internally to our small group of marketers, that we know that our product and our service and our brand is not for every single marketer out there. And that's okay. Historically, we've had the mindset of we want this to be a community of everyone. We want to get every single marketer through the door. We want every single marketer to read the newsletter and to listen to the podcast and take a course and subscribe to this and do everything. And we've been saying, among our small group for years, that we don't have to be everything to everyone. It's okay to say no to people. But it really wasn't until we started digging into this that we realized, you know what? It is okay. We can be comfortable by saying no. And there are marketers who our content is not for, who our product is not for, who our brand is not for, who we don't create for them specifically, and we don't appeal to them. And we have to be okay with being able to say no. And we have to be okay with people saying, this isn't for me. I mean, every time, I don't want to say every time, but whenever someone would unsubscribe and send a note into customer support and saying, I unsubscribed for this, or I don't like this, or this isn't for me, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. We would read that, and the management team would see that, and we would always take that personally. And it would be like, okay, what can we do? How can we get this person back? What can we do? And you can't chase after every one of those, and you just have to give yourself permission to say no. I feel like I've repeated that phrase 30 times in the last 2 minutes, but that's one of our big takeaways is that it's all right to not be for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I think that makes, because you'd rather have a smaller group of diehards than
Absolutely.
a broader group where you've got a lot of people who are kind of half on, half off. It reminds me, I did a little brief talk not long ago about Herb Kelleher, the original CEO from Southwest Airlines, and there was a story about a woman who just unfairly and very meanly, wrote this letter about why she was never going to fly that airline again, and all these really just almost silly reasons why she just hated it. And he wrote back to her personally and just said, "We'll miss you." And usually when people will do anything at all costs to keep someone's loyalty, the attitude was just like, honestly, it doesn't sound like we're a fit, and it's okay to just not talk to me that way anymore. We'll part ways.
And that's the tough thing to do as a brand, is to be okay with that, and to give ourselves permission to say it's okay if Scott wants to leave and not be part of this community. I understand, and I'm not taking it personally. I don't know if you guys have watched a show on Amazon called Amazon called The Boys. It's a pretty rough superhero TV show. It's pretty graphic, but I finished watching season 2 a couple of weeks ago, and in one episode, 2 superheroes are talking, and one of them says, I want everyone in America to love me. I'm the symbol of America. I want them all to love me. And the other one says, no, you don't need 320 million people to love you. You need 5 million people to be angry and to want to take action. And it goes back to exactly what you said, is that we don't need to have every single person. We need to have a small niche, or it can even be a large niche, but a group of people who are passionate about what we do. We don't want them angry, but we want to be people who are passionate about what we do, who agree with the things that we stand for, and feel that we as an organization, as a brand, are in alignment with them. And those are the folks who are going to help move the needle, who are going to really, really help, propel your company to greatness.
Yeah, Seth Godin talked about that, I think, in Tribes, was the book, where he said, like, for an individual, if you get 1,000 people who will buy everything you do sight unseen because they just love you, you can make a living at that. You quit your job, you're good, and you can go be a content creator. For a company, I think that number is different, but it's true that it does not have to be everybody. It really doesn't.
So I'm kind of curious, Matt, you talked about trying to find ways to capture the magic in the sense of community, the sense of like that professional fellowship that happens when you get a bunch of people together at the B2B forum. And you've had at least one major virtual event last fall. What did you do to try to recapture some of that feeling? And I'm just curious to hear, like, what about it worked better than you would have expected? What about it didn't quite work? I think there are probably a lot of B2B listeners who, in various ways, probably not at the scale of MarketingProfs, probably smaller scales than that, but a lot of B2B marketers create smaller, very targeted industry events or customer events that they're having to try to manage virtually. So I think it'd be interesting to hear about, what worked, what didn't, yeah.
So we started by taking everything we knew about, we've been doing the B2B forum for 13, 14 years. We took everything we knew about it and we blew it up. We broke it down and we said, okay, when we are in real life, in physical places with physical people, what works, what doesn't work, what has been a home run, what has been okay, but not great. Let's look at all these things and sort of arrange these things. And we found a couple of things. People like to be engaged with the speaker. We found that out, first of all. Well, there's only so much engagement you can have with the voice over PowerPoint, right? I mean, we're all experiencing Zoom fatigue. We've been talking about Zoom. I mean, Zoom kicked off really huge in March of last year. And I think by April, we were talking about Zoom fatigue already. So this is not a new concept. So rather than having just sort of a static presentation where either I am presenting to you and you're sitting there listening, we pre-recorded every presentation. And the first thought was, oh God, that's even worse than voice over PowerPoint, because no one wants to come in and just watch a video. They want at least some modicum, some feeling that this is live. But we flipped the script a little bit, and we had the speaker in that room live in chat. So we were doing a watch party with the speaker. And we were lucky enough to have, we had tested this out with some other events that we were working on, completely unrelated to B2B. We just thought we would try this watch party. And we had no idea how this would work, because what are people going to think? It was beyond a home run. I mean, people loved it because you're watching the video, but you also have the speaker who is, normally when there's a Q&A happening, you might have someone, okay, I'm going to stop. Let's stop the pod and see what questions have come through in Q&A. There was no having to stop the conversation. You could still be listening and catch what's going on and then talk with the speaker in real time right there. Mm-hmm. So we had our speakers available in the Q&A, and they were live. They had their little cameras up and they were talking, and we had a moderator. We had a half a dozen of us who were moderating each of the different sessions that were running concurrently. So you had some MarketingProfs staff in there you could talk to. You had each other you could talk to. You had the speaker. It was just an absolute smash. And we were nervous as hell. We didn't know how that was going to go over.
Yeah.
And we were tickled by it. So the watch party is a new format going forward because people loved it. And the thing about it is, one of our speakers, and I apologize, I cannot remember who it was, but they made the comment after the fact, well, of course it worked. Think about it. If you were watching a movie and you had Matt Damon that you could chat to and you're watching his movie, how cool would it be? And I don't know if they were, equating themselves with Matt Damon from a marketing standpoint, but it was something that we hadn't thought about. Like, yeah, you have this famous or, at least famous in the marketing world person that you have access to while you're watching their movie. That's really cool. It gives a sense of connection.
Yeah, I was going to say, one of my greatest movie watching experiences was going out to Easton, PA, to a really nice theater to see Blazing Saddles, and it was hosted by Mel Brooks himself. This was a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And there was a different energy in the room knowing that he was down there somewhere. I was up in the balcony, but knowing that he was in the room somewhere and he was watching it too, and then he was going to talk to us about it afterwards. Guy, by the way, got up. I mean, he's in his 90s. He got up and talked for an hour and a half and got more animated as time went on. But this is the equivalent of sitting down next to him and asking a question, and he's saying smart alecky stuff to you and making you laugh. Like, that would be a completely different experience. It's like the director's commentary on a DVD, but like live, and there's Q&A involved. So I do think that's great because you have the access while you're hearing arguably a more polished version of the presentation.
This is fascinating to me, and what I like that anecdote is I'm really glad I asked you because I love that story. And what's really interesting is I've been in a couple of virtual conferences since the pandemic. One of which I think it was one I presented at. Scott and I both presented, and I've seen how they were all live. The presentations were live when we delivered, and live when I was at Spectator. I was at Digital Summit last week, and all those situations. There are all these times where the chat people were asking questions. They're addressing them to the speaker, and as if the speaker was seeing the questions in some way. And the speaker you could tell, and this is what happened with me when I was presenting. You can't see those things when you're presenting, and honestly, you wouldn't want to. You're trying to get through all your material. You're trying to stay within time, and you don't really have time to stop. So all these questions are coming through, and they're just kind of like just blasting them out into the void. And eventually, the moderator, with whatever time is left in Q&A, they can scrape through it and pull up some of the questions and try to address them. But the idea of the watch party and that chat format becoming the place of interaction makes so much sense, because one of the most human moments in those virtual conferences is it's so delightful, it's so wholesome and so pure when a session starts and people start going, "Hi from Delaware, hi from Miami, hey, I'm hi from Detroit." Yeah. And everybody's just like, it's kind of adorable because like these people don't have like much, they don't have any plans to like really network. They're not going to exchange business cards, but they just have this innate desire to just say, "Hi, this is where I'm from." And there's actually like a lot of humanity in those chats, and people will sometimes someone will make a comment and someone will agree with their comment. And it's actually pretty rousing discussion that's happening in parallel to this this live presentation. So I find that interesting. The other thing that makes me think about is how you to your point, you would expect that making it live makes it feel more like a real interaction, makes it feel more like being at the conference itself. Yet it never will be. And so I found that I've noticed that there have been a lot of communication platforms that have performed way better than you would have thought they would during the pandemic, because they have limitations to them. Like, so audio has had this huge boom between like apps like Clubhouse that everybody's talking about, or Discord, but then also podcast use. This stat was wild to me, that podcast listening has increased by a really significant margin during the pandemic. I would totally think it would go down because you'd have less people commuting and you'd have less people going places. So they would have less use of like a platform that helps you engage with content while you're doing other things and you're out and about. People are not out and about as much. Podcast use has gone up. And I think it ties in the Zoom fatigue, I think, a little bit, that, we have these virtual interactions that they're sort of counterfeit real life interactions, human to human interactions. They're kind of giving us the best approximation of it that we can get, but we're losing so much in those, so much of the authentic human interaction, that I think when you limit some of the dimensions, you limit the visual dimension, perhaps you go onto a platform like Clubhouse and it's just your voice. You go on Discord, it's just voices. You almost, something's gained because you're just limiting, you're helping to focus on one attribute of the interaction. And so I think that to me, that really, the watch party concept really ties in with that whole phenomenon, because you've limited something, but it's sort of like you've scaled your ambitions and created a context where people within that context can have a really good lively interaction.
I think part of it, going back to talking about podcasts for a second, because podcasts are my favorite thing, just in the world, favorite way to consume content, hands down. I think, for me personally, when you're trapped in a house with the same people for a long duration and you're not allowed to do anything, it's a means of escape, right? It's just, I can put my headphones in for half an hour or an hour and listen to something and not be sitting at my desk working, but just take a break and let me sort of zone out. So it's from a selfish standpoint, I really appreciate it. But the other side of that is I listen to podcasts and it always takes me probably longer than I need to get in and start feeling a podcast. Some people can jump in and say, "Oh, I've listened to 2 and I love it. It's the greatest podcast." It takes me a while to get into something, but when I do, invariably I feel connected with the host. Like there's a connection so you feel like you know that person, and the more of these episodes you listen to, the more you feel like you know them. And whether you actually do know this person or not, there's that feeling of sameness. There's that feeling of, oh, I know what that person's going through. Oh, I've been in that same position. Oh, I've heard about their life experience and I have similar life experiences. There's a connection that's made. And I think that goes back to that watch party as well, because you're not just hearing someone talking at you, right? Someone is talking to you and you're able to have that dialogue that goes back and forth. So I think it's an added dimension of that watch party that's really fun there.
Yeah. I mean,
I just put out a survey.
You're literally duplicating the person.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're cloning.
Yeah,
it's true.
I put out a survey on LinkedIn. I just needed a LinkedIn post 2 weeks ago, and I couldn't think of anything. I was just having a garbage day and couldn't think of anything pithy to put out. So I thought, the hell with it. I'll just throw up a survey. And the question was, what is your favorite way to consume content? Is it reading, books, blogs, articles, that sort of thing? Is it watching videos, webinars, courses, or is it listening, podcasts, audiobooks? And, I'm 90% audio. That's my jam. I love it. I was surprised that only 14% of people said that, because as you said, I would feel like right now in the last year, this would be the time when audio usage has just really skyrocketed. And I'm constantly disappointed, because every time I ask our audience about those numbers, that's what I see. It's a really abnormally low podcast and audio number, but I wasn't surprised, but I wish that number would go up in our audience, the people who are marketing profs folks.
Yeah.
Well, and the interesting thing for me, because I've probably tripled my podcast listening in the past year. And,
me too.
And prior, I would do it while I was working, but a lot of times it was like radio shows that I didn't want to tune into, didn't want to wait for 2:00 on a Saturday afternoon to listen to This American Life or something. I'd just go binge the podcasts while I worked. And that was really great because you could just get steeped in all these stories and everything. But I've gotten into, like, this past week, I had bought Matthew McConaughey's new book, which is a memoir, and it's really fascinating. It's written really the way that only he could write it. But I had noticed that he was on every single podcast that had more than 6 listeners. Like, he just took the time and went everywhere. And I thought, I'm going to pick 4 different podcasts from 4 completely different genres that are all talking with Matthew McConaughey, and listen to how they interact with him and how he interacts with them. So I listened to, he was on Business Made Simple with Donald Miller, and he was on one with Dax Shepard. And, they were coming at it from that Hollywood perspective. So they had all these anecdotes and different stories. And it was fascinating because you get this 4-dimensional look at somebody, especially when it's somebody that you feel like because McConaughey is one of those people who's just so consistent and so authentic, and you get a richer experience from it. And that's what I like about podcasts, that you can listen to sometimes the same people, or you can listen to a variety of different people talk about the same thing and just get completely different perspectives on it. Matthew McConaughey did not come on our podcast. I'd like to point that out.
To be fair, you haven't asked him though, right?
No.
So, I mean, it's all in the ask.
Yeah.
It's all in the ask.
That's got to be on our 2021 bucket list for sure.
I can guarantee all 3 of us are trying not to do an impression of him right now.
I've resisted the word "all right" at least 3 times.
I hope it's 3 times.
There was a meme going around where people were reading passages out of his book in his voice, and he was reposting them like crazy and laughing his head off. He's like, "You guys are awesome. Keep doing this to me, please."
I mean, that's the thing. Like, he's got his brand, and he's he's not afraid to interact with folks and in a good-natured way, and make light of himself. And that's not that we should all make a mockery of our own brands, but it's refreshing when you have a brand interacting, as a person or as a human, right? And we've all been saying it. We have to humanize our brands. We have to grow our community. There's all the buzzwords like synergy that we've been talking about, and humanizing our brand is a huge phrase, but it really is refreshing as an individual to be able to interact with a brand who takes himself seriously, but not too seriously. And so that's what we are trying to do at MarketingProfs is, yes, we believe that learning changes lives. We are serious about learning, but boy, we better be able to have some fun while we're doing it, or we're doing something wrong. Yeah.
To be serious about what you believe, but not serious about yourself.
Yes, exactly.
Right? And I think I could put that on a crest.
You should make a T-shirt out of that.
We could. It's stickers. So, moving forward, current landscape for everything. We've talked about a number of, I think, really important elements, including the power of audio. And if brands aren't doing that, it's an area of untapped potential in that case. Because I think that we all got so starved last year for overheard conversation, happened upon conversation. Right? I mean, you're not walking through the office, overhearing something and stopping to make a joke or to ask a question. You're not going to cocktail parties and getting to just discuss things with people. We're not even. We're just doing so much less of that. And I think that's why audio helps so much. I think that's part of what drove me to it, because just to have the diversity of conversation in my head, even if I wasn't able to participate, was helpful. What other kinds of advice would you have for brands right now, as we're slowly starting to get back to the way that we remember things?
One of the things that we have noticed in the first 6 months of things, but it still continues today, is that people are shifting from a mentality, sort of a what's in it for me mentality, to a safety mentality. And of course, we're talking about individual, actual real life safety mentality of making sure you don't get sick and taking care of those that do and taking care of yourselves. But also, folks have been looking for brands who, as we talked about, support and believe in the same things that they do, but also are going to be there for them. They're looking for that brand safety, and they're looking for organizations that are going to say, hey, you know what? We're going to help you through this. We're all in this together. We'll hold your hand if you need us to. We'll walk this path together, and we are in the same spot as you are. And folks are very much looking for brands they can connect with from that perspective. So I would say, if you have an audience who is, if you are serving an audience that has experienced hardship, which I think just about every company probably is, find ways to make those connections. Find ways to, here's a buzzword again, to be authentic and to make it clear to your folks that, yeah, we are all in the same boat and we're experiencing hardships just the same as you are, because it bridges that gap and it brings that connectivity there. Because when I hear, here's a great example. We booked a trip. We've been talking about going to Ireland for a year. We booked a trip. We were supposed to leave in July of this year. I don't know if it's going to happen. It may or may not. Just got an email about an hour ago that said, hey, we're really sorry. We have to cancel your flight because we are no longer flying this route. We are going to fly from Boston into Shannon in Ireland. And they're no longer flying that route. And they've said, due to the financial strain and the business hardships that we've experienced, we have to cancel this. It breaks our heart to do this. We're going to try to get you a similar flight with one of our partners or somewhere else. And my first response was, oh man, this sucks. And I was pissed off because I had this plan and we bought the tickets and whatever. But then I realized they are being vulnerable. They are showing, like, they're admitting, yes, we are struggling right now. We are not a big corporate monolith. We are just like you, right? We had plans that we thought were going to happen in 2021 and they didn't, for financial reasons, for business reasons, for pandemic reasons, but we're in the same boat. And it sucks for you. It doubly sucks for us because now we have, thousands and thousands of yous who we have to send this letter to. Yeah. But again, my initial reaction was this was really crappy. But then I read the email and thought, this is actually a very, very well-written and authentic letter. And it didn't come from the president. It didn't come from the vice president of operations. It just came from, I think it just came from their customer support or their brand in general.
Yeah.
But I thought, wow, this was really, I guess, a good moment out of a bad moment, because I stopped and I thought and I realized, okay, I get it. I make that connection. Things suck for everybody. They suck for you guys too. So that's important. It's important to show that you can be vulnerable. And so again, we talked about earlier, giving yourself permission to say no. It's okay to give yourself and give your brand permission to share. We don't have to be the great and powerful Oz behind this curtain all the time. People want to see our foibles. People want to see when we screw up. We had part of what we at MarketingProfs decided to do last March, when things kicked off and things got real ugly and things were shut down and people were losing jobs, was we were going to put together a giving back campaign. And, full disclosure here, we took a significant revenue hit by not having our event live. It's just the reality of it. So we didn't have money to put into an actual, paid giving back campaign where we could support something. So we tried to think of, well, what can we do internally? So we decided that each quarter we're going to at least have one, if not two, or sometimes three free giving back events for the entire community. So our chief content officer, Ann Hanley, did like 3 or 4 long Ask Me Anything event from her tiny house in her backyard about writing. So we know writing is big for marketers. She just had people come join her and spent hours. She gave a presentation and then spent hours answering people's questions. And she stayed there until everyone was gone. Just answered question after question after question. Our CEO, Alan Weiss, is big into mindfulness. So he put on a virtual mindfulness session, and it broke our system. We had too many people register for it. So we actually had to split it out into 6 different groups because so many people signed up for it. We've had a couple open house days where we have just opened the doors to our library and said, you know what? Everything you would normally have to pay for is free today. So come in, sign up for any course you want, take any sessions you want, anything you want is free. So that was the backstory to my real story, which was in January, we had a career day event. And we thought, well, this is great. We're going to sort of capture the momentum of moving into a new year of 2021. We're going to get some great speakers, and we're going to talk about how you can get your resume updated, how you can find new jobs, because a lot of marketers are hurting for jobs, how you can put LinkedIn to work for you and use it as efficiently as possible. We had this whole session set up, and we had about 4,000 people who registered for it. The day of the event comes, and I don't know the number. We probably had 800 or 900 people in the lobby waiting for that first session. And the tool we were using, the app we were using, crashed. Literally, the doors would not open. We couldn't get people into the session. We couldn't play the session. We couldn't record the session. So we fought that for about 40 minutes, 45 minutes before, and it was an hour-long session. We fought it about 45 minutes until we just decided, sorry, guys, we can't do this. What happened was amazing because we had people in this lobby, and I was there as a moderator, and we had Kim, my coworker, who was also there, and we were both in the background trying to frantically get this going. But people were asking what was happening, and so we had some standard text that we were copying and pasting in, and we were explaining that we're working on this. There's technical problems, and we're trying to figure out what's going on with this app we were using. And it was, unfortunately, the app itself just went down. The company that said, sorry, we have to reboot our servers, and it's going to take a while. But what happened, we got to a point where other people in the audience were then explaining. When someone would ask a question, we'd have people chime in and say, here's what happened. MarketingProfs working on it. Matt said this. This is copy pasted from Kim's response ahead, up above. And so we got to a point after 15 or 20 minutes of this where our community was taking over. And they were actually doing support for us. And they were saying, everybody just hang tight. They're aware. They know that it's not playing yet. Because even at 15, 20, 25 minutes after people were coming in, I'm not seeing anything. What's wrong? Mm-hmm. So our community stepped up. And that's not something that you can make happen. No. That's just sort of an organic development. And to your point earlier, I'm sorry, I don't remember if it was Scott or Cliff who said this, but one of you guys said, they're not in chat exchanging business cards. That's exactly what started happening. Because the session was about how to optimize your LinkedIn profile. So people were starting to share LinkedIn profiles and say, I'd love to get connected to more marketers. We had hundreds and hundreds of people sharing their LinkedIn connections through there. And we got so many emails after the fact that said, hey, this didn't work and sorry it didn't work, but I just want to let you know I made some amazing connections because the session didn't go off. And that is nothing that you can script, nothing you can have a contingency plan for. It's completely organic, and it's all about building up and making a great community.
See, that's what happens when nobody can leave their house, and you still have the experience of getting stuck in an elevator.
Yeah,
basically. And yep. How many times have you met somebody who is in business and they're doing something really cool? They've got this partnership with somebody that's working really well, and the way that they met is some really just cockamamie story like that, and you have no idea how you may have affected the course of some people's lives. Just by keeping the waiting room open while you were experiencing technical difficulties. I love that. And I love that.
And that's what, it's okay as a brand to share stories like that, to say, yeah, we had a this was our this was our big kickoff event to launch 2021, and it flopped. We get it. We know. We were able to recover in the afternoon of that day, but our first couple sessions were just borked. So, but people, they don't like to wallow in misfortune, but they do like to hear, what, this company, this brand, this group of people, they have the same struggles I do. We're all struggling with the technology, and we're all struggling with things breaking on us. And how can we make this virtual thing seem less virtual? So again, we're all in this boat together.
That's really cool. So looking for those serendipitous opportunities, I think requires an eye for it. It requires, in a case like that, you had a community that you collectively have crafted for quite some time. You've really been a greenhouse for that. I've experienced it in a number of events and in a number of ways, but also just being, like you said, vulnerable, right? Vulnerable enough to just hang with it and be honest and talk about that. It does humanize you. It humanizes you as a group of people who are doing your best to serve your customers.
Yeah, it's very easy to own your successes. It's very easy to own when something really goes well. It's a hell of a lot harder to own when something flops. By doing that, that endears you to that very same audience you're trying to serve, because these are real people and they're facing real problems just like I am.
Yep.
Well, honestly, we're almost at time, and I was going to ask you if you had one piece of advice for people. What would it be? But honestly, it sounds like that would be it.
That would be it. Yeah, it would be just own it. Whatever it is, good, bad, ugly, warts and all, own it, and don't be afraid to share it.
That's fantastic. Great. Cliff, I don't know if you have any parting thoughts or insights.
No, just I'm looking forward to April 7th through 8th. That's the next B2B forum. So that's the watch party. I guess that's going to be that same format. So Scott and I are excited to record ours this week, and can't give it
Before we go, can we talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, sure.
I want to ask. So you guys are presenting on wonderfully weird ideas, right?
Yeah.
And I've read your description, and I think, well, it's how to catch, tame, and train them. So obviously, you're going to be talking about Pokemon somewhere in there. I feel like it has to be if we're talking about catching, taming, and training. But can we talk weird ideas for a second, just before we go?
Oh yeah,
Sure. Yeah.
What
Do you see what just happened, Cliff? He turned the tables on us, and now he's the host.
I flipped the script, and I'm
Matt took over the podcast.
I know. I love this. I'm here for this.
I'm nervous.
So I want to know, like, what do you guys define as a weird idea? Give me a weird idea that you have seen, experienced, come up with on your own.
Oh man, I mean, we've come up with a lot, but I mean, the idea, the concept is, you look at a lot of the most legendary advertising and marketing communications in history, in advertising history, and a lot of them, whether it's like Think Small, Where's the Beef, Old Spice, Poopery, I mean, you name it.
KFC rearranging their letters to make you think a swear word.
Yeah. Like all of these legendary campaigns, like one of the things, everything Geico's ever done, like all of these legendary campaigns, like one of the common elements that shows up so often throughout advertising history is weird, something that's just absolutely bizarre. And I think a lot of marketers look at that stuff and they feel so disconnected from how that kind of thinking comes about, how those ideas get sold. Because I mean, I often find myself thinking the same thing. Like, how do you sell that? How do you convince decision makers? How do you convince the C-suite to buy an idea that's as bizarre as this? And obviously, the fact that we all know these, that I could just reference Where's the Beef, Think Small, Old Spice, and we all know the campaigns that I'm talking about. It's a testament to the fact that these are powerful ideas. So Scott and I have done this kind of thinking a lot, and exclusively we've been doing it in the B2B space. So, we've rebranded, and by weird, by the way, if you take the dictionary definition, it really just means unusual. And in fact, it's got this more archaic definition that if you go into like the Oxford English Dictionary or something, it basically means like magical, almost supernatural. And so we've gotten to play with this with some of our clients, and we have a water chemistry manufacturer that we rebranded several years ago, and we basically gave them the entire brand aesthetic of these like astronauts from the future. They're a company called Selenus, and it seemed, when we first came up with the idea, it seemed like, well, why would that be the angle to brand this water chemistry company? But it really made sense because it was grounded in a very sound strategy and messaging strategy about a highly advanced service and support, that these people are like a crew that show up to help you solve your problems. And that's what we were hearing from their customers. So, we gave them that brand, and it's really stuck as like a cultural rallying point for their company ever since. That's the one that first comes to mind for me as something that, it took some doing to present that in just the right way. And both internally and then ultimately to the client, to really get everybody on board. And I think everybody's ultimately glad that we did, but we've done a lot of that. So the talk is very much about how do you get groups of people together? How do you ideate toward those kinds of ideas? How do you come up with them in such a way that they are deeply meaningful? Because the other reason that we remember all those weird campaigns so well is because they actually meant something. They weren't just Dadaist nonsense. They had a core message that they were advancing. So how do you come up with ideas that are weird and memorable and unexpected, but also meaningful? And then how do you sell them through in your organization? How do you sell them through to decision makers? And so that's what it's all about. Sorry, Scott, I did all the talking. I promise I won't when we present.
And what I would say, I can divulge this, that one of the secrets to that is that you have to have a status quo in place. in order to do it. So,
Mhm.
and we talked about this in 2019. It's really about rebelling. It's about rebellion in a way that pushes people to think differently and think in a new way about a product or service or about their industry. And when you start to engage in that kind of thinking and still do it with meaning, and I think that's important, but you're essentially just looking for ways to defy expectations to get to a deeper sense of meaning. So what you're doing at that point is you're differentiating your brand, but you're also entertaining and challenging the audience, and they love it. They love it because you respect them enough to try and pull something, and everybody gets that little glint in their eye, and they're like, "Did you see this?" Yeah, right.
Mhm.
And that's where the magic is. And so there's that sense of sort of thumbing your nose at convention that I think is built into everybody to some degree.
All right, my last question before I turn this rocket ship back over to you guys. during your talk at the B2B Forum in April, will I be asked to wear any hats?
No, I don't think. Well, wait, Cliff, did we cut that?
I think we cut the Matt bit. Yeah, because we only have about 20 minutes. So
That's true.
Well, I can't wait. It's going to be awesome, guys. I look forward to it.
Yeah, we're hoping to try some things that people would definitely not expect in this form of presentation, and that is all I'll say about it.
Can't wait.
All right, Matt, thank you very, very much for taking the time out, traveling such a great distance to come and sit with us today.
I did have to move from my bedroom down to my office for this, so you're welcome. Thanks for having me, guys. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
yeah, thanks a lot.
Marketing to Complex Industries has been presented by Godfrey, a B2B marketing agency for industries like yours. Godfrey is built for technical products, discerning buyers, and intricate buying cycles. For more information, visit us at godfrey.com.